Hi, I'm Howard Spence. I record and issue podcasts and blog articles under the name of Howard Blackgoldbloggr Spence. And this is my second or third uh, podcast, and I had wanted to start it a few days ago. I had some technical difficulties with my homeland computer system, but I think I have them worked out now. At least, certainly, I hope I do, because we are now into Black History Month, as it's known. And I did want to make sure that I had an opportunity to give some of my views about Black history, American history, and how those aspects of American life and American history impact you, me, our children, everybody today. So, with that, I'm going to try to give an introductory podcast. And during the month of February, I hope to do several other podcasts, some relating to Black history and some relating to other topics that are representative of contemporary political issues and community activism issues. There is a lot going on in February of 2024, and I certainly want to give my views on some of those issues. And as I often say in my podcasts, I try to give information that will stimulate minds, uh, cause people to either agree or disagree with me. But certainly, I am not an expert in these subject areas. When I give things presented as facts, it's based on something that I have heard or studied. And I invite people who question the facts and information I give to do a fact check, which is in today's world not that difficult. You can usually use Google as a fact check, and there are other ways to find out what is going on in the world and where in the world did Howard come up with that concept or that piece of surprising information. And I think that today, Black people especially need to be vigilant and to make sure that they do take time to be aware of their environment, to be very careful of their environment, and to be proud of their environment and the achievements that they and other Black people have managed to piece together and accumulate over many centuries since 1619, when the first uh, Negro slaves came to what is now the United States. So, with that, I'm going to move into some discussion, but first, let's take a short break. Thanks for staying there and being prepared to receive some of the information and ideas that I am offering. I taught graduate students online at the University of Michigan, at the University of Phoenix for a while, and I also taught some uh, law courses at what was then Thomas Cooley Law School in uh, Lansing, Michigan, which has spread to several other locations earlier in my career. I've been around a long time. Uh, I'm well past 75 years of age, and I still have some memory of things that I'm sure that the present generation of Black people and white people have not experienced themselves. Some of what people call Black history, I have lived, I have participated in, and I have helped generate and become a part of Black history. And since early in my career, 4 or 5 decades ago, I have understood the importance of a people knowing who they are, why they are, what their role in the world might be or should be, and where we're going from there. And early on, I learned a lot about the nature of man and how man builds their coalitions, and it's always a question of me versus you, us versus them. And man has a short memory. And because of that memory, man is doomed apparently to repeat the mistakes of the past over and over again. Not just during the time that America has been here, but certainly going back centuries, back to even before the birth of Christ into Egypt. As long as there have been a people who have tried to explain their existence and they have recorded their history, there have been cycles of history repeating itself. And I want to start my podcast discussion today with a recollection I have of a young Black Caribbean gay boy that I was trying to mentor right here in the greater Lansing, Michigan area back in, I don't know, it's been 30 or 40 years. And his name was Damon. And Damon was going to school in the Grand Ledge School District, which has a history of not being particularly receptive to other than white Anglo-Saxon uh, uh, children and clientele living in Eaton County, where I became an Eaton County commissioner at one point for 3 elected terms. And so I was talking to Damon, and at that time, I think he had only been out of Grand Ledge School for a short while, so he must have been about 20. And as I was talking to him and some of his other friends who had stopped by to, uh, you know, jump in the hot tub and have a good time and hang out away from the world that they saw with their own little friends out there in Grand Ledge. Uh, so I was talking to Damon, and I said, Damon, I said, you've got to start doing better in school. Don't you know that as a Black kid out here in Michigan during this time frame, you've got to work twice as hard as any of your little white buddies that you're out there running around smoking reefer with, and you've got to uh, basically work twice as hard to get half as much. And I said, and one day your friends may not be your friends. And then Damon gave me one of the biggest lessons about Black history that I have ever had, especially from someone that young. And so Damon turned and he looked at me and says, Howard, don't you know that these are the 19 whatever and that there is no discrimination anymore? That was a shock to me. I was speechless. And people who know me know that usually I am not speechless. Usually I have something to say. I say it slowly, deliberately, and some people say I repeat it too much. But that one phrase, Howard, don't you know that there is no discrimination anymore? I just had not expected that from a young Black kid. So true wisdom, or is it? And sadly to say, Damon did learn in his lifetime uh, that the deck may be stacked against him and other Black kids sometimes, some ways. And so Damon is no longer with us. He went to jail a few times. Uh, he sold some drugs, and then suddenly, at a very young age, 40 maybe, he's gone. He's dead. But I still think that at some point he must have realized that as a young Black man in America, he has a little bit more to do than some of his white get-high buddies or whatever, in order to be deemed a part of America, an equal part of America, a part of America that is meritorious and has worth. So that is sort of a preface to what I want to talk about today, which deals with entering into Black History Month 2024. And I am not the only one who has attempted to address the issue of Black history. Today, we see that there is a significant challenge against people who want to talk about diversity, equal opportunity and equity, and inclusion. And so therefore, we have to be diligent to know what we are talking about. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that if we are not woke, as they call it, if we are not aware of our history, then we will get euchred. And by euchred, it's another way of saying probably get the shaft. So talking about Black history, one of the first things I want to do is I want to indicate that there are certain pieces of history from people that some of the young people may never have heard of, which is great wisdom based on experience going back many years. And so therefore, you need to know what your elders have said about it, both Black, white, and other races, about the importance of history. And so one source of those pieces of wisdom that I want to share with you are some quotations and statements or during the civil rights era up to the present day of what people have said about a people who has no root in their history. And one place to look is in a book that I like. I go to it very often and pick out some of my favorite African American quotations, and it's indexed by subjects. And so the book is pretty clear. I hope that it shows up and you can read it. It's called African American Quotations, and it's a wonderful book. But it's a wonderful book because of the wisdom that there is in it. And so I want to share just a few quotations and pieces of wisdom about Black history that I found, and you can find in this book, assuming that the libraries are still able to put it on their shelves, about history. And I'll start it out with an anonymous quotation, which the book outlines, and it's basically, if you want Negro history, you will have to get it from somebody who wore the shoe, and by, one to the other, you will get a book. Now that's kind of a strange saying. It doesn't sound too educated. It's what a lot of people today call common sense, except that it came from a former slave. So it's anonymous. But a lot of slaves would have told you the same thing in more or less different ways, that if you want to know about what it's like to be Black in America, what Black history in America looks like, you're going to have to talk to people who have lived in America who are Black. And one of my favorite authors that has addressed this issue, and I quote frequently, is James Baldwin, who is a Black man. I don't think he ever graduated from college, but he had an awful lot of insight into race in America. And some of his statements, I'll just share a few. James Baldwin said he had no future in the past because once you leave, you really cannot go back. Okay, think about that. And he went on further to say at a different time, I want American history taught. Unless I'm in the book, you're not in it either. History is not a procession of illustrious people. It is about what happens to a people. Millions of anonymous people is what history is about. And he went on further to say, people are trapped in history, and history is trapped in people. And a lot of people, historians of all races back during the civil rights era, white, black, they all have basically verbalized the same concept. If you don't have roots, what do you have? And roots are in history. So we have this one quote, Black America must never forget the price paid for today's progress and promise. Somebody you've never heard of, maybe, Janetta Cole. And then, of course, one of my favorite historians with formal education, in fact, he probably is one of the preeminent black historians of the 20th century, John Hope Franklin. Uh, I believe he was one of my fraternity brothers, an Alpha, but it doesn't make any difference because those are artificial differences. Uh, Fraternities, sororities, uh, uh, well-educated, college-educated people out in the fields, one of the basic pieces of mother wit they get is a knowledge of history that they live. And so John Hope Franklin said, if the house is to be set in order, one cannot begin with the present. He must begin with the past. And I think that's very true. You can't understand what's going on today if you don't know what preceded it. And another activist, I know this is one of my fraternity brothers, Dick Gregory, says American history is a myth and can only be accepted when read with blinders that block out the facts. And we see this today at the beginning of Black History 2024. People are still on the outside, especially some of the Make America Great people who want to basically say America now is a colorblind society. They want to say that the only history worth learning is white Anglo-Saxon history, which they call American history. And I'll have more to say about that because the theme that I'm going to be stressing, and it's a basic truth, is that American history is Black history, and Black history is American history. And so we could just as easily say February 2024 is American history. And we wouldn't have people running around denigrating diversity, denigrating equity or equal opportunity, denigrating inclusion, which is historically a part of the American experience, by saying those things are woke, wrong, and not worth teaching. And you have to kind of wonder, why is it that they are not worth teaching? And why do we teach white history and there are no black faces in it unless you're talking about slaves? And it's impolite to talk about slavery because there is no slavery anymore. And they have a way of suggesting, and a lot of weaker minds with no grounding in fact or history say there is no black, there is no white, there is no black history, there is no Hispanic history, just American history. And American history, if we really want to make America great again, American history is just white, Anglo-Saxon, male, WASP history. the history of white people making America. But they neglect to say white people making America on the backs, out of the sweat and tears of people who are not white Anglo-Saxon people, on the backs of people who are often black, brown, yellow, red, all the colors that we sing in Sunday school when we're being good. Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world. Well, apparently today, the children of the world are all white, and most of them are male. If you listen to what people say who want to make America great again by whitewashing American history. Now, uh, here is a fact, and again, this is one of the quotes I like to say, and it's from Alex Haley. And many of the people watching this podcast would not recall Alex Haley. Alex Haley was one of the first people to try to document the history of black people by video. And he, in fact, wrote a book that eventually got produced into a series of television and informational types of videos called Roots. And it was widely watched. And it had an impact on America for only a short period of time, it seems, because what it showed was white people and black people interacting and how they interacted. And one of the themes was black people are here too. And even more importantly, one thing that today we're not likely to hear from people who are not being woke is that black people are actually people too. There is no black people anymore. Everybody is an American. Okay. So, Alex Haley's commentary, his quote, "There is black history untold in the memories of the hundreds of thousands of grandmothers, grandfathers, great aunts." You get the picture. Just history, especially in areas that are not well documented in an academic way. History is passed down from grandfather to father to son to daughter, and it gets to be a series of stories told, each one a little bit different, but each one adding to the diaspora of what is America, what is American history. Let's see if there's anything else I want to share. Oh, another one of my fraternity brothers. And this one, some of you may know about because he was a Supreme Court justice up until about 20 years ago or so, during a time when the Supreme Court was interested in assuring the rights of minorities of all colors and races. And it was Thurgood Marshall. And Thurgood Marshall, wow, it's been more than 20 years. I guess it must have been 30, 35 years ago. He says, sometimes history takes things into its own hands. Sometimes history drives the narrative and history drives the behavior. And when you forget that, then one of the natural consequences is that you lose your history. And Paul Robeson, again, another fraternity brother. But, the reason I'm highlighting the fraternity brothers, this was the civil rights era. And back then, many of the leaders of Black history culture were members of my fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha. But that's no longer the case because there has been progress in the American people, and more people have become educated. More and more people have become involved with other fraternal groups, with other civic groups, with other activist groups. And many of the leaders of the 21st century are other than members of my fraternity. And, I always exhort alphas to be the best they can be, but to realize that we have a common goal, which is that our people needs to be uplifted. And that true leadership, you don't wear it on your chest with a pin, you wear it on your heart with a willingness to take chances, to advocate for your brothers and sisters, to take some dangerous opportunities to be a community activist, and that getting wealth, getting titles, that type of thing, it's nice, but in the long run, it's not what you think it is. So Paul Robeson said, the course of history can be changed, but not halted. History is one long version of Up from Slavery. History is a people's memory, and without a memory, man is demoted to the lower animals. That was Malcolm X. And I didn't myself know much about Malcolm X until I went away to college at Michigan State University right here in Michigan. And who is this Malcolm X that grew up less than 20 or 30 miles from where I'm sitting today and where I was commissioner of insurance in Eaton County? And Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, who was also one of my fraternity brothers during that time. Malcolm X was hardly one of my fraternity brothers, but he had an insight that, in retrospect, I greatly admire because he spoke truth to power. And so what did Malcolm say? Again, I repeat it. And in fact, it is a harbinger. We need to understand what this truism says and to recognize the fact that there is much understanding and truth in a very simple statement. History is a people's memory, and without a memory, man is demoted to be like the lower animals. So that is kind of the introduction that I want to make to Black History Month. Uh, I I have some videos and some blog postings which deal with these topics, and I would encourage you, if you want to see what I've said in print, uh, that you might want to go to my website, black-gold.org, and navigate through to the page which says Civil Rights Quotes. And that is, in my view, a very important set of quotes because they're contemporary, they're old, they're not just dealing with Black history, they're dealing with Black lives. And so you see quotes from a few days ago, for example. You have AOC talking about what is it like to be a Black person in America or a person of color in America. You have a lot of people, many of the quotes from Martin Luther King, which contain a lot of truth today, even though he's been dead for many years since he got assassinated for telling his truth about America. Uh, when people start telling the truth about America, those who don't want the truth of America known become aggressive, they become evil-hearted, they become vindictive, and they seek to silence the voice of what is the truth of America. And so uh, you go there and you can look at some of these quotes, very contemporary people speaking, white people, Black people, Asian people, Cardi B, uh, you know, uh, a lot of people with their own view of what it's like to be a person of color trying to be an equal opportunity and inclusive person in a diverse American society. And again, as I indicated earlier, you hear people saying DEI. That's the MAGA word for anything that appears to be other than white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male. Make America great again. Take America back to the pre-Civil War days. Take America back to Reconstruction and the Jim Crow era when things were really great, and make America great again. So look at some of those quotes. Think about it. Think about your own life. Think about it honestly. And another place I would encourage you to go if you want to see more about what people, including myself, have had to say about Black history in America, go to my Vimeo page and look at some of the recordings I made in my little cell phone. I like to, especially in the past, like to go out uh, to listen to leaders in the community uh, giving their views about what America is, what dangers America faces as we enter into the 1923-24 uh, uh, era, and what we must do to better understand that. And so my Vimeo page, it's Vimeo, Vimeo.com/ and the user number to find some of my postings is user 190140806. And you go there, and one of the speeches that I did record, and I post some of this also on my uh, video pages at YouTube. I have a YouTube channel, which is YouTube. I think it's 2090. Uh, 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 see, Minority ADR 2090. Minority ADR 2090. Go there and you can see some of these other videos, including some people other than myself who I've allowed to post a lot of community activist type of materials dealing with the Black experience. And think through that. So with that, let's take a quick break, and then we'll continue, because there is a lot I want to say in this introductory video about Black History Month 2024. Okay, we're back. And those of you who have read some of my blog postings and some of my Facebook postings know that I try to explain, to the extent I can, American history, American politics, American culture from a Black progressive viewpoint. And I'm a Black progressive, although I am pretty conservative in some areas. But when it comes to protecting the rights of people, I'm pretty aggressively progressive. Uh, uh, that is a reflection of uh, my own past. In fact, I at one point was uh, an administrative law judge, and I spent time trying to make sure that people had a fair shot and a fair chance to express themselves and to be themselves and to have their worth. One of my favorite sayings is, "I am somebody." And that comes, of course, from civil rights of Jesse Jackson and stuff like that. People of that history era, I am somebody. And I the new version, I tell that to people I bump into now of all races, you are somebody too. And if they can convince you that you need to be somebody else, if you need to emulate them, then you are well on your way to perhaps not being somebody. So the four criteria I use: race, religion, sex, gender, and money. And sometimes all of those interact to create something that I call caste: higher, middle class, low class, and they intersect in different ways. So some people, from a racial standpoint, are much better off than people of the same race who are at a lower economic or lower education level. And so they don't see things together and they differentiate themselves, when perhaps what they really need to do is to figure out where they came from and how they got there and what, if anything, they owe to others. Is life just about making a buck and hoping somebody pats you on the head and says you're almost white? But anyway, using those four criteria, I want to talk for a minute about what is race. Now, race is kind of a strange category because everybody seems to know what race is, but many times their understanding of race is different today from what it was 5 or 10 years ago, from what it was in America 50 years ago or 100 years ago. And sometimes I try to explain it. Like when I was teaching, I tried to explain uh, race in terms of the evolution of race and how people look at it. I point out that uh, early on, back in the 1940s, I was born in Mississippi. Mississippi, god damn, I was born there. And in fact, I had to get out of there at the age of 2 or 3. My family took me north because my father had the misfortune and mistake of honking his horn and interrupting a conversation of a couple of white women standing in the middle of a little country town street gossiping and not letting him go by. And of course, when he blew his horn, I mean, he's bad Negro. This was right after Negroes needed to be taught their place as they were getting ready to come back from fighting in the wars in Europe, where they were just a little bit too uppity. And so, she came back and she said, "You stay here." And she used the N word, and I don't hesitate to use the N word. I believe in calling a spade and a nigger a nigger. Um, you know, I don't get offended when white people say nigger because I know what they are. They're communicating an attitude. When I say it, maybe they know what I'm trying to communicate. But, words are colored, they have different meaning. So I was born colored. And then I went north, and one day I woke up in a cornfield in Illinois, and I found out I was a Negro, which was fine. And then a short time later, uh, I went to Michigan State University, proud Spartan alumnus, and suddenly, listening to this was back like in the late 1960s, uh, uh, that was when we were going through the evolution of becoming black. So I became black. James Brown used to say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. Well, I don't know about that for him, but that's what he's saying. And so we all used to say that, and we go to the dances, and you could hear how we're always offbeat. Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. Well, I came from the country in central Illinois, so I was not a very good dancer, but I did want to be black because I had gone to Michigan State University, and right about that time, Michigan State University was involved in a very aggressive DEI process. They called it affirmative action then. That was their perspective. They brought in to Michigan State University, when I first got there, before I got there, I guess, when Bubba Smith and those guys were athletes running around campus, there were only like 300 or 400 people on campus of color, and they couldn't even stay on the streets of East Lansing after dark. But so that's a part of my experience, and young people will say, oh, no, that could not have happened, you know, uh, but it did. And, so we used to do marches around campus. I remember we were marching around campus when Martin Luther King, so that kind of sets the date, was assassinated in Memphis, trying to advocate for justice for workers and people of color. In other words, the underclass and the deprived. Well, so nothing wrong with being black. And uh, at one point, I went through the evolution of being an Afro-American. And so where do these tags come from? And what is race? Well, race was defined by statute, and it was initially something defined to protect white people from people who would poison their bloods, i.e., particularly Negroes descended from slaves. And there were some laws enacted uh, after Negroes were emancipated to make it illegal for black people, for example, um, to have sexual activity with people of any race other than black. Uh, and it was a crime. People could get imprisoned if they were lucky. If they were caught violating those black codes, prison was not likely to be their destination. Their destination was likely to be hanging from a tree. Uh, we called it lynched. And so uh, it's kind of interesting. American history is black history. Black history is American history. So if I talk about blacks being lynched as black history, they deny it having occurred. But it is truly a part of American history because the other side of that lynching is white history, which they deny or hide, of the Ku Klux Klan running around and uh, lynching people, burning crosses, trying to intimidate people and bully people. Uh, Keep America great. Make America great again. Black history, white history, American history. So, what did the Black Code say? The Black Code said if you are 1/64th Negro by blood, then you were a Negro. If you have any black blood in you, you are black. And, I laugh today because some of the people running around denying uh, the worth of black people, if they had actually been uh, given DNA tests at that point, probably 10 to 20% of the people standing at those Ku Klux Klan rallies would have been, by law or statute or black code, black. But it's kind of interesting that at one point, the best way to tell what you were racially or if you were black was the color of your skin. And so, especially because white history spent little talking about, but a lot of time in those slave quarters, a lot of slave masters were having a lot of brown and light-skinned children who were actually still black and in most cases were still slave. It's almost like master was breeding his stock of slaves himself. And so even though they were his children, they were not regarded as his children. But some of those children, especially after the Civil War, when they could go 20 or 30 miles away where nobody knew them, some of them were so light-skinned that they started doing something called passing. And in fact, in some places, like Louisiana, which has always been a bastion of racial hatred, uh, they even had what they call the brown paper bag uh, experience. People started passing. People who were by law legally black, some of them started looking kind of white, or like white people who wanted to try to get tans, which apparently for some reason they do. And so if you went to a party, uh, you know people who passed started using that to discriminate against people who could not pass. So black people or Negroes who were a part of the bourgeoisie or who wanted to be white or perceived as white, uh, if they had parties, well, if you couldn't pass the brown paper bag test, if you were too dark, you couldn't go to those parties because you were a Negro, just like me. There was a book called Just Like Me, but we won't deal with that. And, so that is the origin of it. And it, of course, led to a lot of hypocrisy. More recently, in the MAGA world, Make America Great Again, we have a renegade rogue Supreme Court, which has been amply stopped by racists and uh, uh, people with warped minds by Donald Trump and others, others including people like Alito and Roberts, who's now the Chief Justice, and they all have had, uh, uh, for the past 20 years, the goal of saying that America is a colorblind country and that race was not a basis for affirmative action. And it showed up in some of the affirmative action cases where they overturned a lot of the diversity, equity, inclusion laws and regulations and procedures by saying those are illegal. They're not even based in the Constitution because, why, Supreme Court? Because they have decided that there is no constitutional rights that were pertinent. And they use that argument uh, based on saying that those rights, just like the right of gay people to get married and some of the other rights, a woman's right to uh, uh, self-dignity and to reproductive health and to be in control of her own body, those were all based in parts of the Constitution that uh, people could not understand. So they overturned them. And so it's the hypocrisy. One of the blackest faces on the Supreme Court also has one of the blackest hearts, and he has had ever since he got appointed there as a diversity, equity, inclusion appointment uh, by George Bush, President George Bush. He has hated that and has indicated that that right does not allow people to make DEI or affirmative action or equality adjustments. That right is based on nothing but a fallacy, according to at least 6 justices now of the Supreme Court. And I always laugh because uh, the same person who is the greatest advocate for saying we need to look at this law and this law and this law because there is no constitutional basis for saying that they can be protected, Clarence Thomas neglected to mention the fact that in the case of Loving versus Virginia, uh, that Supreme Court based its decision on the same interpretation of the same provisions of the U.S. Constitution that Thomas and the rest of the Supremes on the right side of the court said was actually a fallacy, unconstitutional. So, what is the problem? He did not mention Loving versus Virginia in his call for reviewing and overturning Obergefell for gay marriage, uh, or overturning Roe versus Wade for a woman's rights to privacy. Uh, yeah, he indicated those, but he did not mention Loving versus Virginia. Why? Loving versus Virginia was a case from the 1960s based on the same uh, type of logic that uh, the Roberts courts used to overturn Roe and are looking to use to overturn Obergefell. Uh, it basically said that laws which prevented miscegenation were constitutionally illegal, unconstitutional. Well, so Clarence, why didn't you mention that? Could it be because Clarence Thomas, living in Virginia, is married to a white Jenny Thomas? And if he had followed the logic that he and the rest of the Supremes used in overturning Roe and trying to overturn Obergefell, uh, then if Loving versus Virginia was improperly decided and unconstitutional, then how are you going to explain the fact that you're living in Virginia? And if that was unconstitutional, then according to the rationale of this court, and it's up to the states to decide these issues rather than the federal judiciary in the U.S. Constitution, Virginia was one of those states that made it a crime for a black man and a white woman to have sex or to try to get married. And in fact, they were putting people in prison for it. I think it was a felony. And so Loving versus Virginia, you know, uh, a, a, a white woman, no, I think it was a black woman married a white man, and they had to leave the state. And the ACLU took their case all the way to the Supreme Court and got it reversed. It was first ruled to be unconstitutional to discriminate against people in America based on their race. Uh, uh, but then again, apparently the Constitution evolved with this court. And so uh, now it likely would be unconstitutional. But which Supreme Court justice is going to suggest that uh, Clarence Thomas and Jenny Thomas are perhaps uh, involved in a criminal relationship because they probably sleep together? Maybe, I don't know, best friends. So that is kind of another interesting take on development of race. What is race? So let's take a final break before uh, we move on. Well, let me conclude, and I'm sure those of you who have stayed with me this long would probably happily agree that now is the time to conclude. But one of the things that I really would like to highlight is take a look at what the president of the NAACP had to say about race. He came to Lansing uh, a little over a year ago for the NAACP Lansing fundraiser, and he gave a speech, which I took my little camera out and I recorded it. And like I said, it's on Vimeo, and it's also, I believe, on my YouTube channel. And he gave some information that I was not aware of. I don't claim to be a scholar on what is race. Uh, I'm kind of like Whoopi Goldberg. You know, uh, it is what people tell me it is. Just like grow up, for example, in the black church, and right after you learn about Noah and the animals on the ark, then you learn about Jews. And of course, if you are looking at Judaism from the perspective of the Old Testament and the New Testament, you know, I always thought up until a few years ago that Judaism was not a race, it was a religion. And now I find out that I was mistaken. An honest mistake. It doesn't change the way I look at uh, uh, Jewish people, but at the same time, it explains a lot. Uh, because if you look at people of today who claim to be Jews, uh, very few of them uh, would fail to pass the paper Brown test. Uh, but they claim to be a race, and basically, I've always been a person to say, if you want to be a race, tell me what it is, and I'll say you're that race. So I find out, I went and looked at Wikipedia and several other places at the history of race and how race evolved in terms of what the races were. And yeah, Judaism, Judaism is a race. Well, hallelujah. Okay, good. But it just kind of goes to show you that you don't have to be a bigot, you don't have to be stupid uh, to learn something new. And so, sure, I welcome Jews as a race, even though I thought they were a religion. When Sammy Davis Jr. wanted to become a Jew, I thought he was changing religions. Uh, he pretty obviously did not change race. Uh, he became a black Jew. And, so, okay, fine. Doesn't change a thing with me. I respect you for what you are and what you want to be. Now, why did I say that? Derek Johnson, when he came to the NAACP fundraiser last year, uh, gave me information I had not known. Now, slavery is not slavery is not slavery. Black people, Negro slaves, were chattel slavery, which means they were not regarded as people. Some say generously they were 3/5 of a person. No, they were 3/5 of a person for purposes of making sure that the states in the old Confederacy did not succeed from the Union and would enter into the Union, because basically the southern states, they have fewer people, and they wanted to use their slaves to make sure that the non-slave states, which were primarily Union or Northern states, did not have any way to control them and certainly not take away their slavery. So, that's fine. They were just slaves. And in fact, they were treated as less than people. One of the lessons I'm going to talk about is how slaves were treated. They were called chattel slaves. There were other slaves who came to this country who were not regarded as white people by the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant people descended from the Mayflower or in control of the Confederacy. And among them were indentured servants uh, who were the equivalent of slaves, but not chattel slaves. And a lot of those were Irish people. I always thought Irish people were white people. Well, they are white people, but they're not white Anglo-Saxon people. And this is a point that uh, Derek brought out during the NAACP. And he started talking about the fact that workers, that a whole vast group of people uh, who were a part of the caste system today, under which they sit beneath and at the beck and call of white Anglo-Saxon Protestant men who looked down upon them. A lot of them were not regarded as white people. And so the message there was the NAACP is open to people of all races, including people who look white, uh, people who are Hispanic who think they're white, because most of them are not. There's more than one kind of Hispanic. There's black Hispanics, and then there are Hispanics who think they're white. Okay, be what you want to be, and but uh, uh, you gotta kind of understand that you have some of the same barriers, and so therefore, one thing that Derek Johnson said, and it stuck with me, is that worker rights are civil rights. And you kind of see this in what we're going through with the MAGA, Make America Great Again, diversity, equity, equality, inclusion dialogue about being woke. A lot of people uh, uh, who think they're white don't really realize that at one point their ancestors were not considered to be legitimately white, or were considered to be of a different race. And, so you kind of wonder, if you're teaching American history to people with light skins, uh, do you also teach them that at one point they were considered to be colored people? Uh, and do you also teach them that probably 10% of the people who claim to be white are not? Uh, and they're going to make America great again. But what about Native Americans? Are they white people? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think many of them want to be white. Uh, but, so go listen to that speech. It's only like 20 minutes long. It's not rambling and aggressive like mine. It's a typical speech that is given at a fundraiser, but it has a lot of truth in it. So with that, I'm going to conclude my first podcast in Black History Month. And I would just say, yes, Black history is actually American history. But at the same time, isn't American history Black history? What part of American history don't you teach? Like I said, if you're going to teach about slave uprisings, well, are you also going to teach about what happened to slaves that got caught up in uprisings? Are you going to talk to them about the Tulsa riots? Actually, in American history, in American white history, which is not highlighted, most of the race riots in America were not blacks rising up against white people. It was white people rising up to oppress, beat, kill, lynch, intimidate black people. So we can teach the white history of the Tulsa race riots, but we don't, because that part of white history is just too black. I hope you'll join me later for additional podcasts, especially some dealing with subjects that may not be Black History Month subjects. And if you are a people without a history, if you are a people without roots, look and see what history says. Just like during Reconstruction, Negroes who wanted to please master, that's a part of white history, some of the most aggressive overseers who were beating black Negro slaves were themselves slaves. And they beat harder because they wanted to please master. But after their value was gone, some of them got sent back to the fields to work with the people they had been beating. Some of them got old and could no longer dance and please master the way they did. Some of them who had been taught how to pacify other slaves, other Negro slaves, by going and preaching to them out of the edited version of the Negro Bible, which, you write it for Negro slaves so that they don't feel like they can justify rising up. Nat Turner was a good example. He used to be a preacher boy, kind of like the guy that we saw who was black during the inauguration of Donald Trump a few weeks ago. And a clown, a show. Oh, hallelujah! And it was kind of a despicable scene, in my view, for him to be talking and trying to give Martin Luther King's a speech on "I Have a Dream." Basically a clown entertaining the white people in the audience. And if you saw that, or if you go back and look at it, you see people like Elon Musk, and he's hardly white, but he thinks he is. He's from South Africa, so I guess he is equivalent of white uh, uh, from that continent anyway. But they're laughing and shouting and pointing at him, the same way they used to do for Nat Turner. So I hope you're enjoying Black History Month. I hope you do something. I hope you teach somebody something. I hope you look in the mirror and try to determine, are you really something other than an overseer who might get sent back to the fields once you're out of favor? Who is your hero? Who is your master? Uh, what makes you special? Is it because you have a good job, a title, a beautiful woman, whether white or black? Oh well, enjoy Black History Month.